Tonight, we're learning more about the mental state of Nick Reiner, now charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder for the killings of his parents, Hollywood actor and director Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle. A judge in Reiner's case signed a sealed medical order on Friday. According to 3 sources with direct knowledge of the case, the 32-year-old was being treated for a serious psychiatric disorder at the time of the crime.
Will Nick be able to use any of his parents' funds as he stands trial for their murder?
He can't inherit from victims, okay, first of all. So family members can do whatever they want, and I think that's where they're getting it.
So what is the number one clue everyone missed?
I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
The number one clue everyone missed, well, it's not the schizophrenia or the medication, by the way. I'm going to circle back to that in a moment, but you know, right now, Nick's schizophrenia is monopolizing the headline. Everyone is talking about it, and that's no accident. That's not random. That narrative has suddenly appeared right at the same time Nick's hotshot lawyer, the best that money can buy, appeared on the scene.
Well, we have an update for you, Boris and Brianna, that we now know that Nick Reiner will not be appearing in court today. We heard from his lawyer, Alan Jackson, that he has to be medically cleared every day before he can be transported from jail to court.
Wow, medically cleared every day. You may have noticed as soon as Alan Jackson appeared on the scene, we heard about him, Nick, not being medically cleared, and then there was a delay. When Nick did appear in court, Jackson asked for another delay, and that is also just basic defense tactics. Delay and allow the hype and indignation surrounding the crime to sort of fizzle. Also, throw the folks watching on a bone to gnaw on. Well, according to the LA Times, Nick Reiner has been prescribed medication for schizophrenia at some point before he allegedly killed his parents. At some point. Bang! Well, that's really the rub, isn't it? It is unclear the name of the drug and how long he had been prescribed it. Ah, but there's the rub again. Bang again! So the type of medication and how long he had been prescribed it are important details absent any additional context. How long has Nick been diagnosed with schizophrenia? We know he had been in and out of rehab 18 times by the time he was 22, so he was already pretty messed up by then. TMZ are suggesting he was diagnosed with schizophrenia just weeks before the murders.
There are very, very complex and serious issues that are associated with this case. These need to be thoroughly but very carefully dealt with.
TMZ also said medication Nick took for the condition made him erratic and dangerous, with a source claiming Nick was out of his head. So, like the medication is responsible here. The medication made him erratic. The medication made him dangerous. The medication had Nick out of his head. And really, is this really just weeks, eh? So, did the medication commit the crime? But then according to the New York Post, the Post sources said that seemed exaggerated. And I agree with that. They claimed while Nick had ditched his healthy diet, which is usually, this is quite important, usually a sign that he was using drugs again, he had also lost weight. That's also part of Nick's pattern. When he ditches his healthy diet, what's going on? Also, losing weight, what's going on? By the way, losing weight is also something that you tend to associate with meth use. The article notes, but they had not known him to get violent. However, in recent months, he was not acting like himself, and it had left Michelle at her wit's end. So even Michelle, his mother, who was used to dealing with Nick, wasn't used to dealing with this Nick. But look at those words, in recent months. Do you notice the difference in the reporting? Weeks versus months. So this could be a crucial difference. Now, I do want to deal with Alan Jackson's defense strategy and dig more into the legalities surrounding this case, such as the McNaughton rule in the state of California, as well as how Jackson is probably going to go for a full acquittal in this case.
Now, Lieutenant Caffey is going to try and pull off a little magic act here. He's going to try a little misdirection. He's going to astonish you with stories of rituals and dazzle you with official-sounding terms like code red.
By the way, that scene actually comes out of a movie Rob Reiner directed, one of my favorites. Now, the code red in this case is the notion of not guilty by reason of insanity, certainly in my opinion. And I think Jackson has already done a masterful job putting that out there, indirectly, basically a cat amongst the pigeons, which is causing people to question Nick's guilt in this case. But unlike Jackson's other high-profile cases, like Kevin Spacek and Karen Reed, in this one I don't think the cops are going to have much difficulty proving what Nick did. So this is all going to go to state of mind. But that is still not the number one clue everyone missed. In this analysis, I want to investigate a potentially fatal flaw in Nick's case, the case for his innocence, that is. And we get to that by opening the can of worms that is always so vital in family murder type cases, family dynamics. What makes this case so unusual are the family members. In this case, almost all of them are celebrities. Nick's siblings are both actors, which means many things that are often private, usually private, often off limits, and typically extremely hard to know, are relatively easier in this case because the people in this case gave interviews, they're public figures, they're repeatedly expressing themselves, often wearing their hearts on their sleeves, including Nick.
When we get to the end, all the magic in the world will not have been able to divert your attention from the fact that Willie Santiago is dead and Dawson and Downey killed him.
Before we get to that, just a quick shout out. Thanks for your super thanks to Marsha Pop 1827, Annie from Australia, Victoria Townsend, thanks very much, Christina, Just Me Here, all right, Barbara Kirby, Edwina, Alice Hendricks, thanks to all of you. Every bit helps, so don't hesitate if you think a contribution is too small, and the more the merrier. By the way, I see almost a third of you watching aren't subscribed, so if you're enjoying this content, do smash the subscribe button and let's get started. Alright, so are you ready for the number one clue? Well, here it is according to news.com.au. Ever since Nick's childhood, accommodations were made for Nick Reiner, according to a close family source who claims staff were told not to upset him and give him what he wants. That was sort of the number one rule to staff. And I think this gives that comment about Nick being entitled, really entitled. This gives it gains real substance, doesn't it? Imagine growing up and people saying to the staff, give him what he wants. And this goes back some time. He was a very hyper little boy. They always had to keep an extra eye on him. As a kid, Nick always needed more attention than the others. He would throw fits, which later included punching walls on at least one occasion. He wasn't stable. There were many times when Nick had a rant and it affected everyone. Michelle would say to people, his mother, please don't upset him. The family and all their helpers would basically cater to him. Look at those words. The family, this probably includes his siblings, and all their helpers, staff, coaches, would basically cater to Nick. The rule was always give him what he wants. So here's the first half of the number one clue everyone missed. You can imagine if the rule was to give Nick what he wants all the time, that if at a certain point you tell him no more drugs and he was going back to rehab, that would be massive. It would be really hard for Nick to deal with that because he'd been allowed to do what he wanted his whole life. And the whole thing with taking drugs is basically wanting a license to do what you want, isn't it? There were months when Nick would be okay. He isolated himself in the guest house. He was quiet. He went on and off drugs. Then all of a sudden he would go downhill. They would get personal coaches to help him out. Isn't this another instance of him suddenly going downhill? They felt like he did better when the coaches came in, but then Nick would get upset that the coaches were there and the Reiners would fire them. So what do we see? Nick gets upset when people interfere when he doesn't get his way. Sources said there were never any signs that Nick would do anything violent, as happened on December 13th. I think that might even be December 14th. Anyway, and if his parents had feared him, they could have locked him out of the main house if they were worried. But that's something that wasn't in their character to do. I'm not sure that's entirely accurate. Nick trashing the guest house is violence, was violence. His father and Nick both admitted in that 2016 interview that they both got hot, right? So what is this clue? Well, the other half of the clue is when Nick appeared in court, and bear in mind, he can't have what he wants now. Well, was he out of control? He has to sit in jail, eat jail food, and do as he's told. He's got to wear a certain kind of vest. Is he able to do that? Well, he's even been able to hire the best lawyer. And when he's in court, presumably he's been told how to act, what to say, where to sit, and the next time, I guess, how to dress. Is he out of control now that he can't have his way pretty much whatsoever? Or is he able to sit quietly, listen, do as he's told, answer, yes, your honor, on cue? And this is just days after the murders. So how is schizophrenia running the show? How is the medication running the show? Has the medication worn off by now? Or is he actually capable of managing his emotions when he really tries? We also know he went off drugs for a while. We know that he wrote a screenplay with his father. He did a press tour, which all of that shows, yes, he can moderate his behavior when he tries. And his court appearance recently shows that as well, once again. What happens when he doesn't try is a whole nother story, isn't it? And I think all of this shows that isn't Nick capable of running the show? Is this mental illness running the show, or medication running the show, or is Nick capable of running the show? What do you think? Well, I'm not going to take it further than that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.